and welcome. My name is Christy and I'm the head trainer and nutritionist at 68 Fitness. And today I want to talk to you about hypertension, or probably more commonly known as high blood pressure. So today we're going to cover what hypertension is and how it affects your body, and then towards the end of the video I'm going to go through different things that you can do with your diet or different types of food that you can eat that can possibly help your hypertension symptoms or may even delay your progress into developing hypertension. So if you yourself have hypertension, or any of your friends and family may have hypertension or may be at risk of developing hypertension, hopefully you find this video very useful in helping with your diet and choosing the right foods to eat for your condition. And as always, these videos are for educational or entertainment purposes only, and the foods and dietary recommendations that I give at the end of this video are for general reference only, and as always, you should seek your healthcare professional for individual advice that is right for you. I like to start my videos by explaining what we're actually talking about. So just making sure that everybody completely understands what hypertension is. You may be newly diagnosed with hypertension, or you may be just at risk of hypertension and your doctor's told you this big scary word and you're not entirely sure what it is. I'm going to give you a very basic general overview of what it actually is so you have a bit more of an understanding. So hypertension and high blood pressure are generally termed the same thing. And a few years ago when I was at university, one of my academics actually said to me, where salt goes, water goes. And I guess a few years ago, it probably didn't have as much meaning as it actually does for me today. And basically what she meant by this analogy is that in nature, we have this system or this process called homeostasis, where the world and the body constantly want to be in balance. And you've probably heard me say that before. And a perfect example of this is when you take a cup of water and you put a heaped tablespoon of salt. The salt doesn't stay at the top of the cup. Eventually the salt will make its way through the water and it will be completely evenly distributed. And this happens in our bodies as well. So if you have a high salt intake and you regularly consume a lot of salt, the way your body is going to respond is it's going to take water from either the water that you drink or water that is inside your cells, and it's going to send it towards where the salt or the salty area is, and it's going to dilute it, because having a high salt body or high salt blood is very dangerous, and our bodies need to dilute it and balance it to keep everything running well. So basically this analogy that she told us is that if you have a lot of salt in your diet, you're going to end up with a lot of salt in your blood. So the body is going to send water into the blood to dilute this salt, and this is going to cause the fluid in your blood vessels to increase, and this is going to increase the pressure. So think of turning on a garden hose and you just have it trickling through just a little bit. You've got light pressure and the flow is light and gentle and it moves through easily. So when you crank up the tap, you have a high pressure of water or fluid running through this hose, and this exerts a lot of pressure or force on the inside of the blood vessels. Now when we measure blood pressure, we're actually measuring the exerted force on the blood vessel, and there are two readings that we do, and one is the pressure of the blood going into the heart and the other is the pressure of the blood coming out of the heart. So in normal circumstances, our blood pressure rises and falls every day. So during activities such as physical activity or exercise, stress, you may have had just a big fright, all of those things naturally increase our blood pressure, but the body regulates itself back to this homeostasis. All of these types of activities increase your heart rate and your blood pressure, but naturally after a certain period of time your body adjusts and your blood pressure returns back to a normal level. Now in someone who has hypertension or high blood pressure, their blood pressure remains above the normal or the healthy level all of the time. So during those activities such as exercise and stress and things like that, the blood pressure is still going to rise and it's still going to come back down, but they constantly stay in a higher than normal range. Also, depending on your fitness level will depend on the range that you have with your blood pressure and how well your blood pressure goes up and comes back down. So people who constantly have their blood pressure above a normal or above a healthy range are more at risk of having complications and further problems down the track. It's quite dangerous to have high blood pressure, especially consistently. There are many different things that can affect your high blood pressure. It is not just salt. There's also things like the artery walls can start to harden. They can lose their flexibility. You can also have plaque buildups and things like that inside that can also cause high blood pressure. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to do salt. So now you have a bit more of an understanding of how the extra fluid or the extra blood is getting into the arteries. So we have two different types of pressure. So you have systolic, which is the pressure as the heart beats or the heart muscles contract, blood out of the heart through the aorta, and that goes into the body. And you also have a diastolic reading, which is the blood pressure coming into the ventricles or into the heart. So both of these readings get read with a blood pressure monitor, and you probably commonly see a blood pressure reading such as 120/80. So this is your systolic pressure over your diastolic pressure. So there are different levels of blood pressure and different categories that can tell you how extreme your condition is or how at risk you are of other complications or other diseases. So the table might look something like this. So our normal blood pressure range would be around about 120/80. Lower than these numbers is better, but also you don't want to go too low because blood is delivering oxygen and nutrients to your tissues and organs and other cells in your body. So you do need some delivery going around. So an elevated blood pressure is over 120 systolic, so anywhere from 120 to 129, but still less than 80. Once you start getting into hypertension, you have stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Stage 3 is quite severe and you should seek medical attention immediately if you ever see your blood pressure go over 180. Now, if you do have hypertension, it may not entirely be your fault. Now, some people are just genetically predispositioned to get certain conditions and certain diseases, and other people's risks are much higher than others. But diet definitely is a major contributor to hypertension. And some people are just totally unaware of how much salt they're actually consuming in their diet. Now, only 11% of salt consumed actually comes from people adding salt to their cooking or to their meals. Now, the rest of people's salt intake commonly comes from highly processed foods, too much consumption of red meats, and also highly processed meats like salami, sausage, bacon, and other deli meats. So people are pretty familiar with what salt is and where it comes from, but when you're reading a nutrition label, you need to look for sodium. The amount of sodium in milligrams will tell you how much sodium that you are consuming. So there are two main recommendations for salt intake for adults. And for the average healthy adult, we're looking at around 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. For a hypertensive patient or someone with hypertension, it's recommended to not exceed 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. Here, the average person consumes around 5,000 milligrams, so that's more than twice the recommended sodium intake. So other factors other than consuming too much sodium are poor nutritional habits, excessive alcohol consumption, and also insufficient intake of potassium. So sodium and potassium kind of have like this buddy relationship inside the body. So increasing your potassium intake can also help balance that high sodium level and create more of a balance. Now, there's a diet called the DASH diet, which is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. This was a diet that was created to reduce the symptoms of hypertension or to help prevent the onset of hypertension. I also have another video called Diets Don't Work, and I'll put the link just above here. I'll also put the link in the description below. So go and watch this video. It does explain the DASH diet in detail and what it's about. But for this video, I just want to go over a little bit of research about it, or more of a study and a trial that they did do on this DASH diet, just to explain how it does work and how they did realize that this diet is effective in helping with hypertension. So there was a study done in a trial about the DASH diet, and they had 3 groups of people that they tested where they got their results from. So the first group was a diet that simulated a typical US diet. This was used as the control diet, and this is where the other 2 diets were compared against this average diet. The second diet was a mixed diet, or more of a balanced diet, which included fruits, vegetables, lean meats, low-fat dairy, whole grain cereals, but it also maintained a low level of cholesterol and saturated fat. And the third diet was a fruit and vegetable diet that had similar nutrients to the control diet or to the original US diet. And the reason they had these trial groups is because they wanted to see if different food groups had different effect on blood pressure. Now, the combination diet had the largest reduction in blood pressure, reduced the systolic pressure by 11 millimeters of mercury and the diastolic pressure by 6 millimeters of mercury, while the diet that was very high in fruits and vegetables only had a reduction of about half of these values. So the results of this trial highlighted that fruits and vegetables are very important for reducing hypertension or high blood pressure, but the most distinctive factor was the whole grains and the whole grain cereals. And this is why you see advertised so often that whole grains are such a necessity and so important for lowering blood pressure. Now, those who are overweight or carrying excessive weight are higher at risk of developing hypertension than someone who is of normal weight. And not to scare people, but it is important to know how serious hypertension is. Hypertension can lead to coronary heart disease, congestive heart failure, renal disease, and stroke. Hypertension is called the silent killer because hypertension goes unnoticed in so many people for many years. In the US, 35 million patients are diagnosed every year with hypertension. In 2013, 78 million people in the US had hypertension, and $50 billion was spent on hypertensive treatment. And 1 in 3 or 34% of Australians have hypertension, with men being more prevalent or more at risk than women. Now, keep in mind, sodium is a very important electrolyte that we do need to consume on a daily basis, but too much of a good thing can cause many health problems. Consistently consuming too much sodium is a lot of hard work and a lot of pressure for your heart. And also your kidneys are the organs that filter out the excessive amounts of salt. And when you start to overwork any organ, it starts to shorten the lifespan of the organ. So now I've been the bearer of all this horrible news about hypertension. Let's work on some things that you can do to change your diet or some ways that you may be able to fix your symptoms of hypertension. Let's have a look at the foods that salt or sodium is quite high in, and we're also going to have a look at some foods the sodium is quite low in. So take this information that I'm giving you, make some adjustments to your diet, and hopefully you see some positive effects in your symptoms for hypertension. So just before we get into this section, I am going to go over some foods that you can potentially add or change or substitute in your diet that will help with your hypertensive symptoms, or might be just a health change for you to just change your diet for the better and maybe prevent the onset of hypertension later on. I will have a link in the description below where you can download a PDF from my website that will have a list of all of these foods that I'm about to show you now. Okay, so foods that are high in salt intake, we have red animal meats and prawns, processed and cured meats, which include sausages, bacon, and deli meat, chips, pretzels, popcorn, salted nuts, breakfast cereals. Now, some breakfast cereals have a lot of salt and some don't. You need to read the nutrition label on the back of the packet and check. I have a how to read nutrition label video coming in the next week or two, so stay tuned for that. So you'll be able to get a lot more detail on how to read and understand and interpret nutrition labels, so you can add that information onto what we're doing today. So keeping in mind, sodium intake for adults is 2,300 milligrams for a healthy adult, or 1,500 milligrams if you already have hypertension. So when you do read the back of the nutrition label, it will have your sodium amount in milligrams, and it will also say a percentage. So it might say 15% of your recommended daily intake. So out of 100% is your day, if you eat one serving of that meal, then it will show that it is about 15-20% of your daily intake, or whatever percentage it is. So back to our list. We also have canned and pickled foods, cup of soup, so those packet soups that you rip the packet open and you pour them in, that's just like salty water most people dip their bread in. And then if you're having margarine or butter, there's salt in the margarine and butter, and there's also salt in white breads. So frozen meals is massive. Things like pizzas, anything that comes in a frozen packet that you put into the oven or into the microwave are generally very high in salt. Takeaway foods, obviously. So the whiter the bread, generally it is more higher in sodium content than anything that is of a colored form. So the darker the bread tends to be less salt than a really white bread. There is always going to be some salt in bread. That's how you bake it. We've also got baked goods, cakes, muffins, donuts, biscuits, instant noodles, so like 2-minute noodles where you put them in a saucepan, you boil them, or again, those cup of noodles where you pull the lid off, pour the water in. Sauces, soy sauce, definitely, tomato sauce, pasta sauces, stock cubes, and food salts. spreads like Vegemite, peanut butter. You can buy some peanut butter that doesn't have any added sugar or any added salt, but a normal average brand of peanut butter does have salt added to it. Margarines and butters, and also cheese. Okay, so let's check out some foods that are low in salt. Okay, fruits, vegetables, whole grain and whole wheat pasta and rice. Dairy products such as yogurt, milk, egg, and some cheeses. So do make sure you subscribe, because I do have that how to read nutrition labels video coming in the next week or two. So it will be out soon, and I will go through a lot more detail of things of how to compare things like milk and cheeses and breads and show you how to work out which is a better product. Okay, so we have fish, chicken, couscous, beans, lentils, chickpeas, oats and bran cereals, unsalted nuts and popcorn, fresh or dry herbs and spices. So I won't read these out to you, but here is an example of a list of really high sources of potassium food. So you want to include these in your diet or eat more of them if you're not already. So these foods are in order of which ones have the most potassium from top to bottom, but they're also based on a serving size. So one serving of nuts is 25 grams. If you ate double the serving, then you're going to get double the potassium amount. So if you're not already eating these foods, or you think you should eat some more of them, definitely add some more of these to your diet. And there is also small evidence to say that increasing your calcium intake can also help with hypertension. And here is a list of products that are high in calcium. And again, you can see the dairy products, the milk and the cheeses at the top, as well as tofu, and the nuts and seeds have come back as well. So just a few more stats just to show you how out of control sodium intake is. And look, we have to blame manufacturers a lot because they're really pumping a lot of sodium into their products. And if you don't understand how to read nutrition labels or choose foods from your supermarket well, then you may be purchasing, I guess you could call them, these fake healthy products where they promote themselves as being a healthy food product, but really they're not. So many people are just so focused on low calorie. When you have low calorie, it tends to have high something else. And in a lot of cases, low calorie can mean high sodium. So 99.1% of children from the age of 2 to 8 regularly exceed their daily sodium intake. So this is nearly 100% of children from the ages of 2 to 8 eat too much sodium. 86.4% of people aged 9 to 30 years exceed their sodium intake every day. 78.8% of those aged 31 to 50, and 53.6% of people aged 70 and over exceed their daily sodium intake every day. But definitely get onto the exercise, because any physical activity is definitely going to help your hypertensive issue. Or if you're pre-hypertensive, it may even delay or prevent you from getting diagnosed into that stage 1 hypertension. So guys, it is not over. There is plenty of things that you can do in your diet, in your lifestyle, to try and help any hypertensive symptoms that you have. So do use the links below to download your PDF from my website. It is in the members section, so you will need to create an account to access it, and it will have all of the foods. You can print it off, stick it on your fridge, and start working on adding and removing some foods from your diet to help your hypertensive state or to delay hypertension that you potentially don't want to get in the future. Do make sure you check out these 2 videos as well. Counting Calories and Diets Don't Work. They will also link with this video and help you understand a little bit more. I have put both of the links also in the description below, so you'll be able to click on them and go directly straight there. As always, thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was useful. Please share this video with anyone else that you think may provide some insights or some information into helping them with their hypertensive journey, or possibly even preventing hypertension if you're already in a pre-hypertensive state. And also don't forget to check out these videos that we have here. These are our most watched and most recent uploads. But for now, take care, and we'll see you in the next video.